What's up, everybody? It's Casey, the Game Pt. We are back here today with a special video, one that's going to be a little different. It's the recap of my Dungeons & Dragons campaign that I am the Dungeon Master for. We play every Thursday, and it's called Rise of the Mechromancer. It's a bunch of random stuff, my own homebrew world, all that fun stuff. Anyways, I'm going to be reading from a script, so just so I can make sure I get everything recapped here, I'm going to be releasing these every Thursday. This one's going to be a little bit longer, as it's going to be all the sessions leading up to this point. 7 players, who I'll introduce by character. The world we're in is my homebrew world with a bunch of pop culture rips. For example, the whole first campaign, my BPEGs, big bad evil guys as it would be, were a Power Ranger Goblin combo that were evil, called the Filthy Stinking Goblin Rangers. We are in the world that I have, my own world I've made over the years. It's not great, it's not amazing, it's fun, that's the point. It's called Dercuria, where we currently reside in the city of Black Bay, the capital of the Mechromancer dynasty. It's led by a powerful Yuan Ti, General Tenlei Mechromancer. The city is in an age of technological advancement and is meant to be a hybrid of like New York in size with kind of like a Tokyo density, so it's supposed to be real thick urban exploration type stuff. Within the walls are different places and guilds that are from like Magic the Gathering, the specific like Ravnica guilds we have in there because we have source books for them, as you can see behind me there. We've got people with like Dimir, Rakdos, Simic, that type of thing. We also have Strixhaven backgrounds because, again, we have source books for that. So there's going to be a lot of mix mashing and stuff like that. I've also got some random stuff from like shows and movies and games that is just fun to play with. We have lightspeed trains, we have laser rifles, and high sorcerers and magical masters of arcane. With the basic world building, we can have a hopefully little point here where we can start to get into it, and you can hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying it so far. We're going to get into the meat of this, and this is literally going to be the recap of the campaign. So, the age of technology is booming across the world, and so that means a new threat rises to change it in their image. Somewhere deep in a laboratory, a crystal screen hums to life, a cursor blinking. A set of hands begin typing on a set of keys as a question is clicked into, and a voice speaks the words in tandem. Can you hear me? They press a key, moves to the next line, and wait. The cursor sits for a long time, blinking over and over and over until a letter appears. No typing on the keyboard, and no voice. See Y, E, S. A small gasp before a figure steps behind this person, as a blast from a radiant light gun kills them. That figure steps into view, but their face still obscured, as they grab that crystal screen and the device detached, slamming it into some type of metal black iron briefcase. Silence as you hear the of footsteps leaving. A different screen lights up. Y-E-S, 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 all over. This was their setting introduction that I gave the characters, along with some species restrictions. The place hates humans, so we then made our characters during session 0 before getting our story with the basic character intros. Basically, an unknown time passes between that scene and then when we meet our heroes. We have to start out with Ale, the Owlin Rogue / Paladin, and this is their current setup of levels. I'll explain these as they go. Who's a failed and escaped Simic experiment who seeks to find a place in the world and see where they came from. We have Callum, a deep gnome warlock rogue in the flavor of like Edward Elric from Fullmetal Alchemist, the adopted son of the current emperor of a different continent. That was his character from last campaign. He seeks a way to make a name for himself outside of the emperor's shadow. Dara, a variant tiefling from Sword Coast who had wings, tiefling bard, who is the adopted sister of Callum and the adopted daughter of the empress of that continent. She seeks her real parents and the answers to why they gave her up for adoption into the Empire in its entirety. We have Gideon, who is our human artificer / warlock, and the grandson of the great gunslinger Mad Matty, who was his character from the last campaign. Basically, he wants to prove that he can be something other than a gunslinger, and he wants to help people with his artificer magics of prosthetics and potions and pharmaceuticals. We have Khan, a centaur blood hunter wizard who is the sole survivor of a brutal cultist murder, like a massacre of his village, that left him an orphan. They sent him to the city, so he became a blackguard, worked his way up the ranks, met with his partner, who is another one of our characters we'll explain in a second, but also became like a glory pit fighter and currently sits, after a few sessions that we'll explain later, at rank 15 in the kind of glory league that I've named. At the time of this, when he started, he was 16. We have then Sylvie, who is our ASMR paladin bard, who was awoken from a slumber to serve as a blackguard with little to no memory of what came before that awakening moment. She works with her partner Khan to make her way up the ranks, becoming a captain as well. So they're co-captains, or they captains of their own squad, but they work in tandem. So they have dual responsibilities of it. And she seeks to find justice in a corrupt system and why her memory is now lost. Last but not least, we have Snow, the Harengon monk cleric who was in training to be a paladin of Tyr, found that he could heal people rather than harming people in the name of his god. And his parents basically disowned him because that was not the honorable way to do it as much as it was become a paladin and smite thy enemy. He wanted to heal thy friend rather than the other way around. So he's trying to find a way to prove himself in his family's eyes and gain their respect. So with their individual entrances taken care of, we did some minor investigations. Somebody was in warehouses, somebody was tracking down, bad guys, all that good stuff. They received a missive for a missing person report. One Karina Monobos, a Hazardi noble that had gone missing. However, as the troop began to dig into the mystery, they found that she had somehow disappeared from multiple different places at the same time. The clues led them to the center of the city, where the majority of commerce in the city is done, the Morbid Marketplace. Named so due to the hovering cloud cover of scrying eyes watching from above. We ended the session there, as this was the point that we were about to have the group interact for the first time. That was the end of session 0. So they kind of got a little bit of what they were starting out in the city doing. We were interacting with this, and then they all converged at the marketplace. The next session began with some light inquiry of the local shop owners in the quad stop where all the big 4 businesses run. After finding that she had been seen at a train station right before disappearing in every instance, different places, but train stations, same. They were thrown into chaos as a bunch of the manhole covers burst open and nanite clouds began erupting out, kind of swarming everything. The party rolled initiative, and then as the nanites began engulfing the people, they began converting them into half cyborg zombies, basically. The mechanical parts were converting flesh into more monster machine. And given time, if they ate enough flesh, it's a 2-to-1 ratio. Is the whole point of the zombie cyborgs. Is if they are one person, they can eat another person and consume it and convert it into robo. Party rolled initiative began helping the remaining citizens escape while dealing with the mechanical menaces. The cyber threat was eliminated at the cost of some collateral damage, being the people who got converted. But as a short rest ensued, Khan and Sylvie were banished from one of the big 4 shops, Meatsylvania, after some attempted extortion. Basically hey, we'll make sure you get some protection. She was you didn't protect us in the first place. This was the end of the session. Move to next week. Some good combat. As the adventurers were finishing their short rest, they heard a shout for help from further part of the market. Upon their arrival, they found 2 Chimechas, which were converted chimeras, basically landed in to attack. Basically a robotic one of these guys, if you can see that. Got the goat and the dragon head. But these are pretty strong monsters for level 3s, which is where they started. Basically made them that they had taken a bunch of damage and they weren't fully converted yet. So they were weakened and they can't do their fire breath as strong or often. Just tweaking stuff to make it more fun, lower levels. Callum had disappeared into the fray, so when I say that, it means that a player was absent. They waged battle along with some extra blackguard that got a majority of the bystanders out of harm's way while engaging with their fearsome foes. They were victorious, finally met with their missing person, Karina of House Monobos. She explained she'd been kidnapped while escaping, found a terminal describing how this exact scenario would occur, how fishy that sounds. She was fine beyond some trauma and elaborated on how she was the latest in a string of disappearances, being 27 in total. After a little more cleanup, they were treated to Gideon's place of respite, the Quiet Talk Speakeasy, which is in a warehouse hidden inside of the Golden Coast. An evening of raucous banter and a list of activities led to the party closing down the bar, finding rooms within, all on Gideon's tab. Just before heading to their rooms, Dara and Snow witnessed a person slumped in the corner, kind of up against a thing that had been there all night and hadn't moved. When they approached, being Snow, they heard that crackly voice kind of pop out of nowhere, and they heard something like, "Can you hear me?" And Snow gave a confused reply, to which it then activated once more. "Will you fear me?" Snow and Dara gave another cute, confused response once more before the kind of final repeating words, before they heard the head kind of spin and go, and just yes, 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 before it explodes. Converted oil inside. So they had to make a save. Newfound friends went to the rooms to get some hard-earned rest, As they began to drift into slumber, their dreams were hijacked, and a vision of some type put them in an endless field all around. A voice asked what connected them to this world before each character answered in turn. A floating mercurial gear hovered before them, and as they gave their answers, it morphed into their personalized trinkets. A powerful magical item granted to each by the name of a Mistwalker amulet. They got their long rest, and then they leveled up to level 4. We ended our session. The next session started with party waking up, but before leaving the quiet talk, Khan paid Gideon's tab as an IOU, ensuring a favor for a favor later, so Gideon was gone. After a brief breakfast and some contacts, the group returned to the market to inquire around for materials and rumors. They talked to Tiqui, the crystal and gem purveyor, as well as Dara, catching some of her classmates in Yuan tinctures. Tiqui is a Thri-Kreen, by the way, or 3-Kreen, however you say it, whatever. Yuan Tinctures is the potion shop, buying an odd potion or poison on behalf of the school and Borung Kobus, her teacher at the School of Harmonition. Tiqui was bribed by Sylvie to release some information and learned that the undermarket existed beneath the Morbid Market itself. The two rogues had known about this, but it's kind of like their roguish thing. Here lies the old ruins of Black Bay, before General Tenle Marecho rebuilt the city from the ground up, as well as a criminal selling ring for, like, contraband. After Snow found that many of the metallic kobolds, who previously served as like tax collectors or faith bearers, he found that they had been drafted into service after this mass event for like hazmat and gross cleanup crew, unfortunately. As they were concluding business, one of the group spotted a strange person that got sucked into a manhole cover, like a liquid, prompting a hasty response. Most of the team descended while Khan held down the top ground because he's a centaur and they had to climb down a ladder, so that's like a 5-minute act for him to do that. They watched the person get sucked into a crystal capsule about 2 feet long, who was held by a cultist, and then he began to flee. They chased him and started slinging some spells and attacks. He got a little bit ahead and then summoned a displacer beast that he was controlling somehow to attack the group. Snow split off by himself and went to attack the cultist still, and then the 3 below, Dara or Khan, because they were holding down the ladder and the entrance, went to attack the displacer beast. They knocked some stuff out of the cultist's hand and he escaped. They all reunited, find the defeated monster, got some clues, they scavenged the hide off of it so they could make a cloak of displacement later, which they did and wound up selling it during their downtime. After scavenging, they found the beast, while looking perfectly normal to its species, had a metallic chip placed at the base of its spine, where it had converted its whole nervous system into biomechanical. So it was being controlled remotely, similar to like the controlled zombies. Once they pulled it out, they found the chip said K05. They began ascending back to the street from the undermarket as they noticed something strange. More bodies began to get pulled into the undermarket, like liquefied, so they were seeing more of those cultists somewhere in the undermarket away from them getting capsuled. They also found that there were Blackguard there, and as they did, it was a dozen Death Dealers, in fact, which are the like elite guards. They're the ones that are like the private army for the general himself. It seemed that chaos had hit a lull in the day between then and now, but had returned so much. They heard rumors of Saravari Manor as they were sneaking through the undermarket, and some disappearing rogues and thieves that had evaded the checkpoint, and then they escaped. As they were going out, a bunch of giant mechanical creatures were collecting cadavers. We ended the session at this cliffhanger. This week started off with our heroes just coming face to face with a small squad of cadaver collectors. They hopped in some rack rods, which are Rakdos hot rods. Chase sequence ended meeting back up with Gideon, who then got into one of the cars. They made their way, escaped, and evaded a large group of these converted like husks and people, and eventually found a derelict neighborhood in the nobles' quarters, where Saravari Manor, after a few investigation checks and a little bit further travel, they found was abandoned and in this area. Once they did, a mystery investigation happened where they avoided some traps, the house was haunted and infested, a bunch of stuff like that. They eventually made their way to the second floor. A large power source was detected with a detect magic spell by Ale. The party eventually mustered up the courage, walked in through the door to find themselves in like a repeating stairway, where they had to make some checks to get out. Several moments later, and the entire group had arrived inside of like a alchemical laboratory kind of a thing. And so they found a jar on the table with a bunch of books. They took the books. After somebody touched it, it kind of like sucked up the DNA off of Gideon, and he lost the so that it could like convert the bioessence into fuel for itself. The jar then kind of like rattled awake, smashed on the ground itself, and a mechanical hand popped out and skittered away after it went and threw some, fan of knives at the players. After that, they basically made their way back down returned to the second floor. Khan did his blackguard duty, went and checked the door with a big thing labeled monster on it. When he did, he found a room that had a vision waiting for him. Once he went inside, he was met by the one cultist that he saw that burned down his entire village, Faizenel Uvos. He thanked Khan and his friends for letting him get access to what he needed in the house and releasing whatever it was upstairs. They went to investigate the basement, which had an even larger power source, and when they did, they found a large test tube with a bunch of stuff and another mad scientist's workshop, but this one was much more like set up like they'd been there for a while. Tubes of goo and material lined the wall with books and test tubes. Their search was fruitful as they found research logs of one Karina Monobos, as well as a new threat that burst out of the tube after being riled. And it leapt through the building, 7 buildings it destroyed. The party escaped the manor, not before finding some interesting research logs and diaries and ending their session on the front porch. So after that, the next 2 sessions, like 2 weeks in a row, were downtime sessions. Covered a week of downtime where they did multiple things from Xanathar's. You can look up the downtime activities in Xanathar's and the Dungeon Master's Guide, and then there's a little bit in the Player's Handbook. A lot of things happened over the week. There was magic crafting, pit fighting, glory fights, religious services, research, schoolwork, guard work, and amongst other things, there was a bunch of like lore drops because they were doing all that research and like running around the city pretty well with like the light speed train. One of the big things they learned was a well-dressed person had last been seen with all of the kidnapping victims, and furthermore, there had been some discrepancy between the number of disappearances. They learned that Karina was the creator of this virus, and that the name of said virus that was like spreading as the nanite cloud is called the autophage virus. They also learned that its source was inside a place called the Mogushan Vaults in the undermarket somewhere, but not actually where the vault was itself. They also found that the thing that came out of the tube in the basement was something labeled the Tyrant Project, the Nemesis, capable of mass regeneration, brutal strength. They then found a book called The History of the Incarnates, where they saw a large set of arcane math or calculations of some type written in a combination of Simic and Azet mathematical ciphers. Between Ale and Gideon, they were able to determine that this was some type of ancient code or blueprint for something. Other than this, Ale went and made a deal with Teeny, who is a proprietor of Tiny's Place, a magic item vendor, and got a set of bracers of flying daggers. In exchange for the item, as he didn't have all the funds at the time, she told him that she could get dirt on the owner of Yuan Tinctures, try and put her out of business, and that'd be equal. The 2 sessions ended with Karina summoning them to the Golden Coast via some sending spells to a warehouse. As they arrived, the Nemesis smashed down, crating her and turning her into like some good old-fashioned red paste, and that's where the session finished. The next session started with initiative into combat, as several moments later, a couple of Nivik Cyclops also burst into the scene, having been enraged by something. After a few moments, a person with a professor's attire and a gleaming silver rod arrived to aid the group, banishing one of the Cyclopses while shouting to the group. Khan used his techniques to hold on the Nemesis long enough for the troop to escape with his newfound ally. They explained that his name was the Doctor. The Doctor was looking for a place called the Mogushan Vaults, and there was something in there sealed away that he had heard was calling, called the Heart of the Mechromancer, and said that it had been calling out to the stars where he heard the message on repeat, "Can you hear me?" As they rounded the corner, they all heard out the loud, like, of the entire train system going down. So the Lightspeed train after this point is no longer active. After that, the Doctor basically went, "Hey, I'm going to drop you off at the School of Harmonition," and summoned a portal. Session ended. Next session started with the Doctor opening the portal to let the players go home, but as they stepped in, it flipped upside down and dumped them out into the magma caverns below some volcano they didn't know. There was a bunch of cultists now seen there with this large, like, hunched orc type of thing, and are waiting to kill the party. He stepped forward, summoned up several loose lava oozes and fire elementals before shouting at the group across them. He assumed the shape of an exceptionally well-dressed man, a porcelain face with no features, and stepped through a portal. They rolled initiative. The lava was rising. Several of the party members almost perished in a fiery demise. They did escape through the portal as the Doctor was there to stabilize it and let them through. He did actually make a portal, kind of stand in the middle, let them out to the School of Harmonition, and told them to probably look into people trying to assassinate them via portal. Now we're up to, at this point, the second most recent session, which will be the week, 2 weeks ago from when you're seeing this. It started with 2 Blackguard. There are 2 Blackguards specifically. Khan and Sylvie, they were summoned to their post for further investigation of their arrests during their last week, which is something they have to do for their being like captain of Blackguard. They have squads each of 4 guards and a scout, so they have 8 guards and 2 scouts that they have to go like make a quota for arrests across the city, do their guard job. Snow joined them on their trip to their post as they found that other than the 2 guards outside the door, the place was deserted. Nobody at the entrance, nobody making arrests, no people in like booking or holding or interrogations, nothing, just deserted. They heard people walking around upstairs, but nobody on the base floor outside of the guards outside the door. The other half of the group, at the meantime, was taking a short rest. They stayed at the School of Harmonition. Also noticed that the School of Harmonition was inactive. There wasn't anyone going in or out of it. People were still around in the area at the time, but nobody was going in or out of the school, which was odd for the time of day as they made their insight checks. They headed up to their offices, checked in, eventually found that their death dealer who had summoned them, Tomoro Usui, they two of them entered and Snow stayed outside, making perception checks to try and listen in. He was successful and listened to most of the conversation until the death dealer snapped his fingers to put up some type of false veil so that anyone who was listening couldn't tell or heard some type of masked words. He was the death dealer in charge of their area, basically their part in the slums. They were told along with some egregious arrests, they would be heavily fined if they didn't make some things right. Usui then told them about a favor that would help them further their careers and abate the fines at the same time. They needed to get rid of Zafanelid, who was the owner of Yuan Tinctures. They accepted and headed to the Morbid Marketplace. At the School of Harmonition, Gideon, Ale, and Dara began their investigation and found that all the students present had been poisoned. They found their teacher Borung Kobus was not dead, but managed to save him before Dara was attacked by a person in cult-like attire, some darts. The group chased the individual and found that it was one of the classmates, one of Dara's classmates, and a Yuan T by the name of Zeddy. One of the two students Dara had actually seen getting poisoned from Yuan Tinctures earlier, like a week or so ago. They made their way after interrogating him and finding out that they got the potions and stuff, or poisons had been distributed via porridge in the school and poisoned all the students. They found that some of the students were, when Gideon drew blood, they had converted oil in them. However, Borung seemed entirely fine. After that, they then found that they needed to go to the Morbid Marketplace and made their way there. At that point, the party reconvened and we were no longer split. They did some little bit of dialogue and the friendly exposition cantrip, if you've never heard of that. Basically, it is, I'll put it up on screen here real quick. It is, explain whatever the DM just said to my friends. They talked, figured out what was going on, and then at that point, that's where we ended our session. This is the most recent session, as you're seeing this Thursday morning. This was last week's session, so this will be the most detailed. At this point, you'll have probably another, hoping 10 minutes or so of this as I've edited it down. Week to week will be these individualized, so it'll be about this length, hopefully no more than 10 to 15 minutes every week. It started with the group deciding that this was going to be an assassination attempt, as Con and Sylvie had been told to do this with the heavy air quotes around get rid of. They decided doing it in the home turf of her poison shop would not be a good idea, so Gideon used his cap of disguise, turned into a Naga, which is another servant humanoid type person in the city, and went to ask her on a date. Succeeded on the persuasion check and then managed to leave. She was telling him meet her at De Blanche, which is the super ritzy place in the nobles quarter, but it's ritzy by look and it actually just kind of sucks. It's overpriced. At 8 p.m., which was roughly 4 hours from where they were at now. At that point, she kind of took a few minutes as Gideon was leaving. He failed a perception check to spot something. She then closed up shop, left, and went behind as Ale was sitting behind the place stealth and saw her walk into a cellar beneath a storm cellar that was set up by her tents, assuming it was her basement probably. Party minus Snow finished talking with Teeny about some magic items. Left for his temple. He basically was like, I'm not being here. It looks like they're still planning that to get rid of her. Left for his temple and made a mad dash there. With some athletics checks, did not get exhausted and eventually made it to the party, who, after Snow had left from the shop, conversed about how to jump her in an alley outside the inn where they planned to meet her, and they broke the huddle to begin something. Gideon began getting bit by something in his armor, so they basically then started going like crazy and ham, and a swarm of snakes began going after Gideon. They found out that it was probably Zafa, because it had been placed on him when he wasn't looking. That perception check he had failed. After this happened, there was a big boom. The storm cellar behind popped open and there was a big purple light that came out. After that point, they heard some steps and then they all ran down into that basement. Snow found his street close to where his home was. He was about, maybe an hour out. So he then saw, as he was doing, the street was abandoned, all the forgeries, because he lived in the forge area where all the clerics and stuff are in Hammerdon. He made it to near his temple, about an hour away, and saw that the area was void of everyone except for blackguards guarding entrances. When he went and looked by, the blackguard told him yeah, can't come in, everybody's closed, and he managed to see, as some wind blew some curtains open, that there were people who had been poisoned on the ground, similar to what they described at the School of Harmonition. Passed his medicine check to kind of suss out that, yeah, it was poison, and then once he did, he made a bolt. Another athletics check, succeeded, so he didn't have exhaustion, and made it to his temple. Once he did, he found that there were blackguard outside of it, everything was closed up, nobody going in and out for regular services. Went up, made another medicine check to persuade them that he was actually a healer, he had his vestments on, and that he should go inside in case there's something quarantined, and they said, yeah, there is. Let him inside. As they did, he found that there was someone at the altar. He couldn't hear him. It was pews were full, everybody was in line, but they were all like head forward, some type of trance or stasis. At that point, he heard the ominous voice begin to clarify as he passed a few pews. A massive fiendish claw descended from the ceiling, with their archbishop inside, the one had trained Snow, crushed it, using its blood as a sacrifice to open a portal, which then dumped a bunch of this converted oil out onto the floor and began flooding the temple. The people in the trances began to convert, and then their heads went split open and began firing laser beams at Snow. He managed to escape out the window, and as he did, the people burst out the front and began swarming after him like the snakes had done earlier to Gideon, but these were the cyber zombies from earlier, almost fully converted. He slung some spells, and the Blackguard and the Death Dealers helped, but they were beginning to get overwhelmed. As they did, another portal opened up above, and a bunch of snakes dumped out like a sea. They then materialized into this big coiled Yuan-Ti anathema with 5 heads at the top. Turned his hand, crushed all of them into a ball, and slammed them on the ground, and making them innate. Disappeared in the portal, all the snakes scattered. Snow went up to check, and the Death Dealers were standing there, dead too. He kind of like tink and heard metal, looked inside of an eye, and saw a metal chip in the back of an eye. He then like looked, pried one open, and found that it was a K05 chip in the back of his head. Checked a few others, found the same thing, that kind of like tink in the back of their head. At that point, a vision of Tyr grabbed them as they felt the shoulder kind of like weight press from some type of divine, told them to find some type of something. He couldn't hear it at the time, as the religion check was failed there, and then whisked him away into a teleportation or transportation of some type. Meanwhile, back to our main party up here on the other side, they found several of the tubes in the underground lab that had underdeveloped clones of different things. In the center was one labeled E121, and as they approached, it was a mirror image of Sylvie, our ASMR paladin bard. When she kind of like touched the glass, it shattered, and then this half completed clone of her was like in her arms as she heard a voice ring through her head. She was granted a fragment of this clone's soul and kind of absorbed it. After failing a history check, though, with the assistance of the memory, could not recall what her memory was at that time. The party then descended after Zaffa down these steps that led them to an entrance in the undermarket that was hidden from the outside of the staircase by an illusory wall. They had fortunately in all that time lost her as she had escaped during that moment while they were investigating the tubes and the clones. When they did find a temple, however, and with a religion check, Sylvie found that there was some type of calling for them to it. They approached and found that there was a symbol of balance representing both Bahamut and Tyr in my world, because they're both symbols of balance and righteousness. When they entered the temple, they found that it had been built of dual, like half from one piece, however, seemingly, but split down the center of obsidian and porcelain. Obsidian in the right and porcelain on the left side. There were 9 statues of this figure, Eileen the Forsaken, 4 lining it with 1 at the center in the front, behind some type of altar and dais. At this point, Snow then whisked out of teleportation as the hand of Tyr dropped them within, behind, or near the dais, the altar. A book kind of flung open to a page, and Snow made a religion check to begin reading it. As he did, Sylvie watched the statues assume a pose, and she matched it. A voice rang through her head once more. Sylvie replied yes, and an obsidian sword flagged down through her. Successful con save meant that she was granted a transformation in both physical appearance and one for game mechanics. The ASMR form had been changed from its silvery gray sheen to match the statues that she had been surrounded, half porcelain and half obsidian. The ritual was complete, and the remaining magical energy swirled into the tome, transforming it into the same half black and white to match the statues, imbuing it with the ancient magic of Tyr's balance. That concluded our session, as I made magical items and transformations for the characters that received them this week. You're all caught up now. It's one long one, And at the end, it got pretty detailed, as that was the most recent session, and that's kind of what I'm going to try to do over this. The whole point is to have some type of audible archive, so that, I mean, for the most part for my players, I hope anyone else that's interested enjoys this as well. I'm going to try and do a little bit of stuff here to make it not just me talking for a half an hour to 45 minutes. They should be only about 10-15 minutes after this, because it's going to be week to week to week. I'm not going to recap all of that stuff, and then I'll post them every Thursday morning. Thank you for watching this. If you made it this far, remember, I'm a DM, casual DM, having fun. We're at our home table, homebrew, whatever setting you have, you know, it's what my players asked for. That's what we're doing, and we're having fun. We're all here to have fun. You're welcome to take any magic items shown here or earlier to your table. I have no problem with that. I might have ripped something unknowingly if you find it's similar in 5e and I might have done it already. I'm Casey, the Game Pt. This was pretty fun, and at the end of the day, we'll always be here. Make sure you leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. Bye-bye.